First off, it is a privilege to Fairview, but we love the people of Fairview, and we obviously love our Lord who directed us to do most of this work. But the first thing I want to show is that the opportunities that these folks had was to come and homestead the country of Kansas territory, right, back in the day. But the interesting part is, when we were doing all the research, when you had a homestead patent, these were the descriptions for the place where you were to go. First off, we were in Township 25. At the time of 1870, there was no Fairview Township. We're going to learn that in a little bit. But we are south of the range of 4, east of the 6th principal meridian. I've actually done so much research. It's so much fun to learn all that too. Anyway, but it's the district of land subject for sale from the Wichita group, and it was 160 acres. Now, some people did homestead a little less than that or a little more than that, and they could have chosen that along the way. But these people came. That is a homesteaded, that's a replica of the original homestead in Nebraska. We'll go into that in a minute. But that was, at the bottom is the picture of the church, original church in 1884, as it stood. And this is all impacted by all of these acts from the Congress.
Yeah, this is the part of more general history. The land grant, or the 1820 Land Act, was actually east of the Mississippi. It had to do the Old West Territory, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin. So the people that were settling there were able to buy land for $1.25 an acre in 160 acre plots. It was actually right after the panic or depression of 1819, and so the only thing that was kind of interesting about it, you had to put all the money up front, because what caused the panic was a lot of people that really were terrible risks, but the government and land and speculators and so forth actually allowed them to buy land. Probably shouldn't have done that, because they could pay off the debts once the panic set in. And so anyway, that's the difference. 1841 Preemption Act, what it did is basically, if you squatted on the land, if you were there for 5 years and had developed it, you had first dibs to buy it. But it's still all east of the Mississippi pretty much. The one that really impacts us is the Homestead Act of 1862. And again, you only had to pay a fee of $10, 160 acres, and then if you developed it, then you could pay it off in time. And that's the one that Cheryl's going to talk about more. And the Morrill Act had to do with establishing state colleges that catered to agriculture predominantly and other sciences. And Kansas State was actually first of these land grant colleges. So, and then the Timber Act, as you see there, had to do with, you may not know, we have a lot of trees now, but back in the 1860s and 70s, it was just a sea of grass. So, in other words, they wanted to really help people. They were given benefits and subsidies if they planted trees. So anyway, that's kind of the government behind the scenes helping settlers come into this region.
So one of the questions I had is, how did people know to come to Kansas or go to the West anywhere? So as I started looking online, we found, number one, there is an actual, and if you've never been to Beatrice, Nebraska, for the Homestead National Historical Park. If you've never been there, it's amazing, because it is located on the very, very first homestead from the 1862 Act. On January 1st of 63, this gentleman, Daniel Freeman, signed that he wanted that plot of land 30 seconds after January 1st, after midnight. So he was the very first one, so that's why they put the park there. However, so we go to the park, and on the walls there are pictures of all of these posters that sent people everywhere. You know, if you wanted to go, here was the look. But so in Kansas, I'm going to show you two of them real quick. The Pacific Railroad is involved in both of these, by the way, as they got people to come. But the play on this one was for home, farms, health, and pleasure. So wherever they came from, and we were able to show you that most of these people came from Ohio. There's no story about that. But anyway, they transported people and they transported crops back and forth. Was part of what the marketing was. Then this one sent people to northwestern Kansas through the central branch of the Missouri Pacific Railroad. And again, full quarters, developing the market schools. It's a very healthy place to be. And we kind of take giggle about the word is free from swamps and malaria. So wherever they came from must have been a really rough area, right? But then they have first class agricultural land, the corn, the wheat, the winter and spring wheat, ranges for stock, all those things that would appeal. So this was what was drawing people to Kansas. Now, in what we learned, and this was from some of the historical Butler County history books, but our folks from Fairview Township, many of them came from Ohio, and I took an entire list. So when we were at the park, the ranger actually helped sit us down, and you can go out, there's a national website that has all of these. And so I got the entire list for section 25, all the stuff, and I put them in their sections so I could see, because I was curious. My question was, of those people who came to Fairview Township, how many of those people were involved in our Fairview Baptist Church? The light blue will show the families that were involved in our church early on. And so, yeah, Jim's going to show you some examples for you. So
that's where the church is located on Ezra Nye's property.
Yeah, and that's at the right, and that's at the current Hunter Road and 20th, Northwest 20th Street, right at the northeast corner. The yellow block up there is from a history from Halsey Holbert, who is one of the guys who started the church and came. We'll talk about him real quick. But the yellow, yeah, his was down there. But the yellow was when he said they were at the beginning of Rock Creek. I kind of put the first settlement up there in 1857 up there, where in general the Rock Creek begins for the township. And so we have all of these people, and it's been fascinating to watch. So moving forward, we're going to try to find out who sold who and where did they go and who's there now. One of these days we'll get there. The next thing is, again, a lot of these people came from Ohio. The other interest for Cheryl was, I am an Ohio native, born and raised in Ohio. So this drew my whole attention. The founder, the Fairview Baptist Church members are listed on the right. Those that didn't have at least a known connection to the church are listed over here. But all of these people came from counties in the state of Ohio during the 1870s, 1771 to come. And you can see, I also did kind of selfishly, maybe I put myself in the green star right there in the center. I was born and raised in Morrow County. But the rest of them were primarily from the eastern side of Ohio. Now, we're also going to learn that there were some homesteaders. Jim was talking about the Act of 1820. The parents of these people would have been in Ohio, and I bet most of them came because of that act where they could get land from wherever they started. So, Mr. Nye, though, is designated as, and I'm going to say, here's where our church story begins, though. Mr. Ezra Nye, who on his property started this land, came again from Portage, Ohio. And we're going to not worry about the occupation, because all these say farmer and stock raisers, because that's why they came. But Mr. Nye did have a medical history, and Tim's going to interlude here as he needs to on the history. But the Civil War had was just got done, and these men they had some amazing impact into the Civil War. But he was on the 19th Michigan Volunteer Infantry. He was in the Army of the Cumberland and Sherman's March to the Sea, and spent some time in Libby Prison.
Yeah, he would have been in part of the battle for Atlanta, and that's probably where he was captured. And I don't know if you know anything about Libby Prison, but it was terrible. It was a Confederate prison that was located in Richmond, Virginia, and it was only supposed to house maybe a few hundred. It got to be into the thousands, and it was just this big old tobacco warehouse, what it was, without hardly any, running water, bathroom facilities or anything. So a lot of guys died in here. It had a terrible reputation. It did. So anyway, he was there for 3 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, before he was paroled. So.
Yeah, and his contribution then to Butler County was massive, but he was closely associated, obviously, to the education. I have a picture back here of one of the Center District schools that was built at 30th and Hunter, north-southwest corner, where he would have had some of the services and things. But the church started in this gentleman's home. And if you know Jim Tillotson, his house is located approximately where the Nye family lived. But he contributed to the education, religious movements. George and James were his brothers, followed him from Ohio to Kansas. They both had, James did have a homestead himself. And interestingly enough, the paper had that Ezra Nye had I think it was the first self-finder in 1884, which was quite an automation point at that point in time. Now, and start the church he actually did. Our little church started with 30 people in 1870. These are the list of the primary people of which I have done most of the research on these particular people. And we're going to take a look at those. They did a lot of work in Sabbath school, what they called our Sunday school today. They called it Sabbath school in 1871. And when you'll see, if you go back to one of those original books, that actually starts in 1985. But the records still call it the Sabbath school. And pardon me. I'm sorry, I said the wrong. What did I say? 19? I'm sorry, 1885. Okay, so we're going to talk first about those who homesteaded Fairview Township in the 1870. So we have Hiram Holbert. Hiram is a brother to Halsey and a half-brother to Sarah. And these were all family in Ohio, and they had come to homestead. They all three had a homesteaded plot segment. Hiram, though, and we don't have any military history listed, but he was very active in education and religion, and he was a Baptist church, but he was a deacon in our church, and he served as the treasurer for the school district, and he was a justice of the peace, and had other offices within the township. Before we go any further, though, I want to talk a little bit about Hiram and Halsey's father, to give a little bit more information about their religious background. William, who is Hiram and Halsey's father, and his brother Halsey, so we've got an uncle Halsey, they homesteaded in Ohio in 1835. They started in a log cabin. They eventually built a 2-story home. You can see the picture of what it currently looks like. That was a kind of a slight remodel in '97. But this was a sketch probably before it was done. But a 2-story, 6-bedroom, 1-bath house. They participated in the Underground Railroad. So they were conductors. So they actually walked and went with some of the slaves into the next station, which they believed to have been Oberlin, Ohio. And then most of these folks were then on their way to Ontario. If you know anything about Ohio, we've got Canada right across the border with the lakes up there, Lake Erie and Ontario. I wanted to say one other thing. They were masters also, where they actually housed people in their home. And there was a picture where they had them in a very small little place in that beautiful house. But I want to read though a section. It says, well-read and devout, William, so the father, was as a deacon of the Baptist Church in Seville, Ohio. Holbert children went to church, period. No debate, and the family convened often for intimate, meaningful worship at a time, or at the altar in the Holbert's 2-story, 6-bedroom, 1-bath home that was built in 1835. Halsey inherited his father's religious convictions and, like his father, became a fervent Republican who supported President's leadership to preserve the Union. Halsey's mother, Eleanor Brewster, died when Halsey was 4 and Hiram was 2. Eleanor, their mom, descended from Elder William Brewster, a passenger on the Mayflower, and he was the spiritual leader of the Pilgrim colony in Plymouth. When Halsey was 8, his father married Sarah Willie, and she was really the only mom that they actually knew. So the heritage, the religious convictions ran deep in the Halsey family. We have another gentleman, Stephen Corey. He was actually one that was born in Canada. Came in the Northwick section of 28 there. He actually hauled lumber from Emporia for his first home, as many did before El Dorado became a little bit more of a metropolis for everybody. He appears to be the last charter member to remain at Fairview Baptist Church until his death. And in one of the books over here, it has when they transferred membership from one to a new book. His is the very top name with him coming, and that date was in 1904, is when this book started. And Corey passes away in this book in 1919, but his stone says 1920. And you want to talk about his military history?
Yeah, not a whole lot to mention. He was part of the Battle of Atlanta. He was wounded. So anyway, the battle for Atlanta was pretty intense. There were several battles, actually. And it was a part of Sherman's march to the sea. Once they had captured Atlanta, all the railroad hubs, went through Atlanta, and by capturing it, then Sherman could also go on down to the sea to Savannah. And so it really crippled the Confederacy a great deal. So he was a part of those. There was actually 2 armies under Sherman, the Army of the Cumberland and the Army of the Tennessee. And I was a Civil War reenactor for many years, the 8th Kansas Infantry, and I was part of the Army of the Cumberland.
Okay. Then we have Charles Irene Giraud. That's his Belgium pronunciation. He was born and raised in Belgium. His family came to the United States, and they did, and you all may be familiar with Girard versus Giraud, but it is the same family. And we didn't have any military history for him, but he actually settled in Jefferson County, Kansas before coming to Fairview. He had one son who's by the name of Clyde, who was a Holstein breeder. And he brought his Holsteins, interestingly enough, from Wisconsin and Ohio. And I want to say New York was the other one. So Ohio is connected even in his beginning years. And then he had a grandson, Dr. Girard, who was a physician. He was born in Cali County, but I understand people have said, oh yeah, he was my family practice doctor here. I cannot get any proof of that. But there's nothing in the newspapers, anything like that, so I didn't put that in here just because I couldn't confirm it. But I do believe that he was around. And the church, there was a 4th generation daughter who was still involved at Fairview until 1972. So that was a long 100-year connection to Fairview. Then we have George McDonald. This gentleman came from Seville, Medina County, Ohio. So did he know the Holberts? Don't know. But they came from the same place. This gentleman he hauled his Emporia home, all his wood from Emporia also. He was a dedicated deacon at the Baptist Church in 1877. Tragedy struck his family, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But he did move to New Mexico in 83 and then came back in 85. When he went to New Mexico, he did not sell his place. He came back to the same location as far as we know. All right, now we're going to move to 71. 1871. So here we come with Halsey. I will say, that we know more about Halsey probably than most of these folks because his is probably a great-great-grandson, wrote a book that when we first got to Fairview, it's called My Dear Grace. And one of our current members and seen it in the library. So I have a copy of it back here because I went out and bought a copy. But his daughter, Grace, was the great-grandmother of this guy, and he wanted to know, what happened. Anyway, the first 4 chapters were the most interesting to us, but he was wanting to know about where his dad was and all that, and that was at the end of the book. So a lot of this information came from there, and I want to absolutely give them credit. But he was the one who was first associated to some of the school information.
Can I just interject? Grace's name is in one of those books.
Yeah, we can
As
show
well
it.
as Halsey and so all these early members. Wow, we've actually seen their signatures in our ledgers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been fascinating to see. He was the first clerk of Fairview Township. When the township was started in 1873, he was elected as the first clerk. When they got here, it's really an interesting story, and we'll try to make it quick. But he left Seville, Ohio, went to Cleveland, Ohio by stagecoach. From Cleveland, Ohio to Kansas City, 3 days on the train, 900 miles, which I thought was kind of fast. I would have thought that was impressive. Anyway, 3 days and 2 nights. He got to Kansas City. They went to Topeka by train. They spent the night in Topeka at a Robinson house. 3 blocks away from the Robinson house was a broom factory. The night they were there, that broom factory burnt down. Welcome to Kansas. and so anyway, yeah, the broom thing. And then so from Topeka to Emporia, they brought the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad. Took him 1 day to get to Emporia. Then in Emporia, he goes by coach, stage via Cottonwood Falls, Bazaar, and then into El Dorado. Now, they get to El Dorado, they find and now the stagecoach driver that was driving them from Emporia, Will Homestead, just at a catty corner of them, I'm assuming because of the testimony and whatever, but he was, the stagecoach guy was here, his wife passed away in Ohio in 1869, he moved out here, and then he homesteaded them in Fairview Township. And the Southwest Stage also has some very interesting rules, and I've got them in one of my books over here that I saved as in my research. It's about how the language around women and those kind of things. So it's actually fascinating to read. Okay, so Halsey taught at some of the schools. He taught at that Center District School. He taught in Plum Creek. He taught in El Dorado. At one point, he was riding his horse 10 miles a day there and 10 miles back in order to get his education pieces finished. But he's going to be. But when they first came, they joined the First Baptist Church in El Dorado, which I thought was really interesting. But here's why: is because Amy really liked the women's dresses. She was impressed. Yes, she was. And so hours-long ride by horse and buggy, and even longer if you were using the ox team. So that was quite a commitment just to even get to church on the day when you could potentially have one within a couple of miles. Even that would have been, that's a ride too on a horse. Okay, so we continue then with our people who are homesteading that are connected to the church, and that is he is a captain, Joseph Randall, who has a great military history. I'll let Tim talk about that. But he had a whole bunch of, just all those setbacks that everybody else had. But he also ran for the House of Representatives position in Kansas for our section of Kansas in 1884. I don't believe he made it though, because I couldn't find any record of him being the one who was actually in the legislature.
Yeah, I was really impressed when I saw that he was a part of the 21st Ohio Volunteer Infantry Regiment. He was at the Battle of Chickamauga, and also the 8th Kansas was too. I'll try not to go into too much detail, but essentially what happened in that battle, that's in northern Georgia, that the overall commander basically said, move this division toward the left, and it shouldn't have happened. And it left a big gap in the line. And so what happened is the Rebs just kind of really poured through that gap, and the 21st Ohio, the 8th Kansas, and the 1st of Minnesota tried to hold the line. And as a result, they suffered over 50% casualties. And when you suffer over 50% casualties, you can no longer do offensive operations. So it was a terrible battle for the Union. They lost that battle and had to retreat to Chattanooga. So anyway, wow, you know. Matter of fact, if you go to this museum in Chickamauga, there's a big diorama of the 21st Ohio, and it's very impressive. It's very sad, but very impressive.
Now we go to Mr. Thomas Green. We don't know a lot about Mr. Green except I don't know, he built the church. He was a stonemason for the Fairview Baptist Church building project. He actually supplied the stone for the church. He donated his entire time of building that church. He was one of the first deacons. He served as Sunday school superintendent, and his son, Hartwell Leroy, married Sarah Hulbert, who was the half-sister to Hiram and Halsey. E.G. Richards, he's another one, but the important part about him is that he had two sons who were getting ready for the ministry. They went to Denison University of Greenville, Ohio. Unfortunately, it's now not a religious organization at all, like many of those who started out. But in 1883, though, it was established by the Ohio Baptist Educational Society, and the kids went back to Ohio then for their education. But he will, though, in 1883, build a successful lumber business in Towanda. And then we have Reinhard Ratz. This gentleman came from Indiana. He is one of the later comers to Fairview. He came in 1876 first. Then he left and went to Barton County, and he was back, though, in 1883. Things didn't work out in Barton County. We were kind of glad to get him back. He, though, he wanted an apple orchard, a peach orchard. Wasn't as successful as he hoped it would be, so then he changed to the farm and the stock process, and he was very successful. He is a very faithful member of the Baptist Church and at Fairview. Now, what I want to say is I'm going to read this paragraph, but this paragraph is seen, and the sense of this is seen in almost any of the, it's a good summary of the entire group of people. But it says, R.J. Ratz was a good citizen and a kind and devoted husband and father. He was deeply religious and a faithful member of the Baptist Church and was a Bible class teacher for a number of years. He was a prohibitionist in theory and practice, and an ardent supporter of the cause. At one time, he was a candidate for sheriff of Butler County on the prohibition ticket and received very satisfactory support. His loss when he passed away was not only felt in his own home, but in the church and the community at large. Both he and his faithful wife are entitled to much credit for the part which they have taken in the development of this county. They came here and cast their lot with Butler County when at times the future looked unpromising. But they were of the type of people who had a purpose, and that was to make a home for themselves and future generations. And by persistence and enduring hardships, they finally won. And today, Butler County is filled with prosperity, and its future is not an ethereal hope, but a substantial and well-founded promise of plenty. That was their mission. And now we're going to see some trouble on the horizon.
These were pretty hardy people. They suffered several tragedies early on. The first one was a tornado in 1871. Then in 1872 it was a prairie fire. And then 1874 were either locusts or grasshoppers. And it just destroyed everything they had. But they stayed. That's the thing, it's amazing. So you can see here that there's a big description of that in My Dear Grace, but the storm came from the northwest and passed the slide about 2 hours ahead of El Dorado, then it really smashed in. And this was in June of 1871, about middle June, I think the 16th. You can see here crops and everything was just just leveled like crazy. As a matter of fact, when it went through Fairview, Amy, which was Halsey's wife, their little cabin was actually knocked off its foundation, and she got and her son Rolo under the bed to try to survive. And she kept yelling to her husband, "We'll go back to Ohio now, won't we? We'll go back to Ohio." So anyway, that was just pretty scary. A couple of tragedies. It's not related necessarily to Fairview, but to El Dorado. You can see a 3-year-old Lowell Mason McKenzie, son of a doctor, J.A. McKenzie, actually was swept from the arms of the mother. And anyway, they found his poor little body about three blocks away or so in a little creek. So I can't imagine something like that. And then also Frank Crawford Murdoch, that was actually her name, who was the wife of T.B. Murdoch, the editor of the Walnut Valley Times. She had struggled with mental illness for a long time, although she was very religious and came originally from Marietta, Ohio. But anyway, she had imagined that her husband was under attack or in danger of losing his life, and he tried to assure her, "No, this is all on your imagination." But anyway, something snapped when the tornado hit. She actually killed her little boy, slit his throat, killed him pretty much instantly, and she did the same thing, but she didn't do a good enough, she didn't finish the job, so to speak, and died a couple of weeks later. So anyway, kind of a really sad story. Interesting, at the bottom you can see that Augusta and El Dorado tried to go back to St. Louis to get some help because everything had been so devastated during the tornado. Like I say, the next year was Prairie Fire, and actually it was Al Wheaton and his family were probably going to visit his brother, which was in one of the sections up north. It was turned down to the south. We don't know what caused the Prairie Fire, but they were in a wagon, and anyway, they were, I think, out in the field working on their farm, but anyway, when the fire came, it engulfed the mother, and the husband tried to save her, but couldn't, and he was burned really very bad. But the horses actually took off where the little girl was actually still in the wagon. So she survived. He survived too, but he was badly burned and so forth. But the wife passed away. And it was also during 1873 that, like I say, they had come in there, and the township was actually started in January 6, 1873. You can see here.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. And H.H. Holder, M. Randall, and so forth were resigning officers. Okay, then another thing that happened that's more nationwide was the Panic of 1873, which lasted about 6 years, but it did affect, the whole nation. But it had to do with railroads. There were all of railroads during this time, but most very expensive to own to maintain and so forth, the railroad, and many of them could not make a profit, but a lot of people were investing in them, but when these railroads would go belly up, they couldn't pay off their debts, so it caused really kind of a panic or depression, and it's not here on the screen, but a lot of these railroads asked J.P. Morgan to come in and say, "Okay, I'll give you money to stay afloat, but you've got to merge some of these railroads together. Instead of having a bunch of little ones, have bigger ones. And then I need to be on 51% of the board, percentage of the board, the assets." So that's what saved a lot of these railroads and the recoveries you see over there on the last slide. But anyway, you can see over 100 bank failures, 89 bankrupt railroads, businesses went out, unemployment 14%. That's really high. And anyway, one of the other things that really interesting that took place, because many railroads and other businesses tried to cut wages, and there was a great railroad strike in 1877. It started in Baltimore, Maryland, with the B&O Railroad. And anyway, they cut the wages, and so a lot of guys were upset and angry. So they still tried to run the railroad to Martinsburg, West Virginia. And actually, the railroaders stopped the engine or the locomotive. And so anyway, the governor of West Virginia had to call out the militia to put it down. But then what happened, because of all the unemployment and everything, there was a generalized strike that took place. I mean, all over the country, because all these companies were cutting wages or laying off workers. So they were trying to protect their jobs. But anyway, the organization that was called J.P. Morgan, that helped things bounce back about 1878. Oh, yeah, got one more. The grasshopper plague, 1874. And anyway, it's really interesting. Again, this was all over in the West. I mean, these grasshopper plagues was apocalyptic in nature. I mean, they would cover thousands of miles, just devastating everything, just like you would think, with the plagues in Egypt in the Bible. I mean, it was that bad. And anyway, Halsey Holbert mentions the fact that, I can't read it real well, let's say, against the backdrop of a worldwide financial panic. So in other words, the panic started a year before. And the growing season was particularly dry and distressing. In other words, they weren't making a lot. And anyway, the Walnut Valley Times indicated, well, we hope that the grasshoppers won't come here. They'd come in other places. And but anyway, by noon, by the very time when the newspaper came out, the noon, boom, the grasshoppers came in and just devastated everything.
Okay, so now from 75 to 77, just a generalized information here. We've had, we was in great condition. The neighbors were working on their spring crops. The flax was going to be good, very profitable, and all the things. And Mr. Nye was planting walnut trees, which he did that in 72, and then this year they were tall enough and were bearing walnuts. So, I mean, this looks kind of calm though, for that all that was going on with the canning. But at the same time, it was they were finally getting a little bit of reward for the work that they had been doing all this time. 77 to 79. Here we start now some of our more major plans in the church actually being built, the building itself. In 1877, the church leaders come together and they join the Walnut Valley Baptist Association of Kansas. 2 deacons were assigned, Mr. Green that we talked about, and Mr. McDonald. Sunday school superintendent was Tom Green, and the clerk was H.H. Holbert. The church location, the interesting thing about this is in September 25 of 1878, Mr. Nye gets his patent that says he has paid his due and debt to get the land in that section 22 southwest corner. The same month, so he now owns the land. The same month, in 1878, he made an actual application for an abstract that would give that one acre to the trustees of the church, and we'll tell you who those are in a second. But the application in September, and then 79, it was actually granted to give that one acre to the church property. Now in 1880, so we're getting a little bit closer, here is the first newspaper announcements about the church. And the El Dorado Republican on February the 5th said, this is going to be the first building outside of the towns put up in this country. We think it was because of the stone structure being outside, because most of the other ones would have been, clapboard and wood, right? And then in the next week, then in the Walnut Valley Times, it said that Mr. Nye had provided the stuff. It was going to be a stone church, southwest corner of his farm. Dimensions were 24 by 36 feet, and they hoped to have it done within a year. April of 81 was going to be their day. We'll see. And then Ezra, on April the 6th, he gives a warranty deed to to the trustees of the Fairview Baptist Church without any reservation. And they said in the articles that it showed his faith in the ability of his neighbors to build and maintain a church on that location. Now, he remains very, very active in the church, so don't think he's not going to be a part of the church. Later on in the summer of 1880, Mr. McDonald, who I said had that tragedy, he had 3 daughters that died within 8 days. The reason was dysentery. The oldest, the one in the cemetery, Luella, she had been betrothed to a gentleman, to a young man in El Dorado. And so this went kind of far into the, into the whole community. But there is a beautiful message that, again, I want to read this one because this is the article about their death from their pastor. The first pastor of Fairview was Reverend C.G. Manley. And he buried these girls, and they had a community service. But it says, seldom are we called upon to chronicle so sad an event as 3 deaths in one family in the brief space of 8 days. But such a painful bereavement has been experienced in the family of G.D. McDonald of Fairview Township. Mary McDonald, who died on June 25th, was aged 10 years and 6 months. Luella McDonald died June 30th, aged 19 and 6 months. Elsie McDonald died July 2nd, aged 7 years and 6 months. The disease was dysentery. None of them were sick more than 10 days. Everything was done that could be done in the way of medical treatment or nursing. The whole community turned out to take care of them. Everybody is in sympathy with this sadly afflicted family. A large congregation assembled to listen to a funeral discourse by the writer, Reverend Manley, on Sunday, July the 4th. The parents and remaining son and daughter mourned not as those without hope. The youngest gave good evidence of preparation for death. The oldest was a worthy member of the Fairview Baptist Church, to which all the remaining members of the church belong, or the family belongs. It was the writer's privilege to baptize her 3.5 years ago, with some others. On the occasion, oh how happy are they who their Savior obey, was sung. Just before her death, she bade adieu to her family, shaking the hand of each one, also administering with some parting counsel. Now she sing the song that was sung when she said, sing the song that was sung when I was baptized. Joining in the singing, she fell asleep to renew the song on the other shore. That appeared in the El Dorado Republican on July the 8th. And he's the one who stayed when they went to New Mexico. So, as most building projects, they're in question now. December 18, there's a gentleman, TDG is the only initial we have. I'm not sure who it stands for, but my guess is it's somebody from that Baptist Association that they joined. But he went to Halsey's house, and who was the clerk at the time, and the members were voting to say, are they going forward with the church edifice commenced about a year ago? So that would have been in 1880 when they started thinking about it, and they had the land and all the things. Unanimously, they determined to complete those stone walls, expecting the final success of completion. Now, the church is continuing, and God is at work, but it's not quite as fast as they thought, because now we jump to 1883. How is the church coming? Oops, I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button. How's that church coming? Tom Green is still the supervisor and the stonemason. The husbands are working the building. The women are keeping the workers fed. And that certain is when the women were in the kitchen, just imagine them all chit-chatting. But the church membership at the time of this recording was 100 people. But they're not done. They're not in the church yet. 1884. Now, this first slide, we wonder why in the world are we talking about the flood in Ohio? Because we reached out to St. Louis and all the other people when we had the tornado and asked for help. They had never lost their heart for Ohio either. Most of us, if you lived in any other state, whatever, you don't forget where you came from. But in 1884, there was a major flood. that started through the entire Ohio Valley from Pittsburgh. And I just want to note it's the Allegheny River and the Monongahela River out of West Virginia and the one in Pennsylvania that are feeding the Ohio River as it begins in Pittsburgh. And all the way down, so at the crest of the flood in Cincinnati, it was 71.1 feet above flood stage. Now, that picture up there is an actual picture from the flood, and you can see the little lamppost right there. Now, Cincinnati's right on the coast, right on the border, you're right on the shore of the Ohio. But this would have been all the way down. But it did one, and so Claire Barton was involved in this one. It was one of the first major repair thing, or support for the disaster. That Captain Randall and H.H. Holbert, they gathered enough corn for one train load, train car load of corn to be sent back to Ohio. There were 20 other cars that came from other Butler County towns that went back, and a Mr. Miller, and I don't know who Mr. Miller really is, but he paid for artists to come in, and they painted the train cars that were going back to Ohio to make it, I guess, so much more special when they got there, I guess. But the point of this is, these people were giving people, they were loving people, they were taking care of, they're trying to be that amazing group. So we get to August of 1884. 1884, the church is actually done. It's going to be done on August the 8th. Mr. Nye puts an article in the paper that says it's going to be capped on August the 8th. His daughters, Mr. Nye's daughters, Miss Mary and Miss Lenny, they get a festival going on in the church in that night, ice cream and all the stuff. And it was recorded that the festival was very successful. There were attendees from El Dorado and Towanda, and at least 25 couples were there at the inaugural, the first opening of the church. The interesting thing about this, though, is we have a gentleman, Mr. Gray, he and his wife, Mr. and Mrs. Gray, were trying to come to the church, and then Mr. Corey was with them. I don't know too much about Mr. Corey, but Mr. Corey was driving the wagon at the time, and Mr. Gray fell out of the wagon and broke his neck and died going to our festival at Fairview Baptist Church. And so that's a downside to the day. The church was dedicated on December 1st of 1884, best we can figure. And this dedication happened with a Reverend J.C. Post. We'll talk about him a little bit more, but he said, and the article in the paper said that it is a stone church costing about $1,200, and it was open for serious, and it was free of debt when that was completely open. So the value was $1,200, because we know that the stone and all the stuff was paid for, and people were doing their help for free. We have faithful pastors during this time of the church here is dedicated, right? So our pastors, the three pastors that we know of, are Reverend C.G. Manley, who was their very first one. He was the one who did the funeral for the girls. There was also evidence that he had a church in Augusta. So we didn't have a full-time pastor. We had part-time and or itinerary pastors at the time. So we had and all of that is noted in some of the other documents too. But then we have an F.M. Barker. F.M. Barker, and we're getting really close to time running. But I've got to just tell you, so the church welcomed him. On the evening of December 25th, the writer and his family was made happy by the brethren and sisters of Fairview Baptist Church this county. The occasion was that of the donation for the benefit of their pastor, whose donation was held at the house of Brother Ezra Nye. A sumptuous supper was prepared by the ladies, which was enjoyed by all. The young folks gathered favored the crowd with good music, and everyone participated in the pleasures of the evening. We especially were made to smile on account of the oats, flour, meat, potatoes, and a little pocket change, for all of which we are thrice grateful to the donors. Yours truly, F.M. Pastor. And how special those simple things were that we take for granted today. And then we have Reverend Post then, who dedicates the church. And I do want to say, Reverend Barker was also a pastor in El Dorado. Reverend Post was also a pastor in Wichita. And if you'll notice, Pastor Barker did services on the 3rd Sabbath, and Reverend Post did them on the 1st Sabbath. So we have Fairview Township is alive, Fairview Baptist Church is born, God and his people are working together through good and at times to fulfill that mission, and may those years continue, many, many more. Do you all have any questions for us? Yes?
Wait just a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know there's a cemetery there now.
Yes.
Was there a cemetery associated with the church?
Not in these early days. That cemetery is fairly new. Do you know when it was started?
No, not exactly, but.
But it's been in the last 20 years.
About 20 years or so.
Yeah.
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 All the burials that you show are either in Towanda or in El Dorado.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it seemed
Towanda,
like a
yeah.
long way that there wouldn't be a cemetery in the area.
Yeah. It was not there at the time. And I will tell you that Dr. Ezra Nye was buried in California. One of the gentlemen was buried in Michigan. But most of them, though, are in Towanda or the two cemeteries in El Dorado. The McDonald family is the one very specifically in Bella Vista. And the Holberts and most of them are either in Sunset Lawn and or Towanda.
I'm going to keep asking questions until you tell me to stop. The stone for the church, do you know where that was quarried? Who donated the stone, or?
I do not. All I know is that Thomas Green
did a
is the
lot.
one who brought it up to be used. Yeah.
There's a lot of little quarries around the township there, and I just wondered if there was any record of which it was.
Yeah, I wish I knew, but that's something I didn't come across.
Cheryl and Tim, on that, one of the very first slides that you had that showed the platted, areas and, something really intriguing to me is I do the Black heritage of El Dorado, have researched that for the past decade or so. And so, I don't know my class, so is it number 10? Is it a 10? On the second row from the bottom, Reuben Waller. You see the name Reuben Waller? In the middle, second row up from the bottom. He was a black gentleman. Yes. He was a body servant for his master. He was black. And he's buried Sunset. But he was at Maddox. He saw Lee surrender. In his, he doesn't have written memoirs, but they're oral histories been taken. And he was a Buffalo soldier. So he lived to be 105. He's buried in Sunset with his 4
Oh,
wives.
yeah, that's right.
That's
Yeah, I
Reuben,
remember
that's
now.
Reuben.
Denise and I would have
Beautiful.
seen that
Yes,
same year.
So
Yeah.
fascinating gentleman, Reuben. And then his uncle, I think Martin Reynolds was his uncle. If you've run across the name Martin Reynolds, he also had land in town in Fairview. Martin Reynolds, he was black as well. He was Reuben, I think it's Reuben's uncle, or the other way around. But he was in the Civil War, and no acknowledgement in Sunset. In fact, his stone is one of those little brick crumbly things that I'm really I'm going to dedicate some time to getting a proper stone for a lot of people like that.
Yeah.
But especially Martin, and then Tim, I was never familiar with Coxey's Army. Are you familiar with Coxey's Army?
Yeah, a little bit.
He marched with Coxey's Army. It's in the El Dorado papers. He disappeared for like weeks, and they said we came back to the West Coast with Coxey's Army. And so I thought that, so those two
That's part of the
gentlemen.
populist movement,
Yeah, so very interesting. He was a black man who fought in the Civil War. So when they have soldiers reunion in Gordy Park, he's always listed as a veteran. The Civil War, and Reuben on the Confederate side, he was a body servant. But he's the one that was stabbed in Maddox right there. So it's really,
I can, well, and just even the history of the ones that I was able to touch, as amazing as that is, I believe there's an amazing story in every one of these.
Yes.
There just is.
Thank you so much for the presentation.
Anything else? Thank you all for your attention. Thanks for letting us hear this story with us.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. Next month, We have Autumn. I don't know how to say her last name. Hearn. Autumn Hearn, and she will be presenting on her book, Buried El Dorado, Silent Stories Beneath the Oil Fields. So that'll be next month on the 3rd Thursday, and you can pre-order lunch for that event as well, up until Wednesday afternoon at 4 p.m. But we also have coming up next week is our STEM Day for our kids. It is a free STEM festival day. In the morning, we'll have lots of STEM stations. And then in the afternoon, we'll have competitions and presentations and over $1,000 in raffle prizes to give away to those kids. It is free for the community, so if you have any kids who would be interested in coming out and learning some science, bring them along. So thank you guys for coming. I hope you have a great day.